There's not really a fancy intro this time around, I just want to cut right to the chase. This year for a lot of people was absolute garbage. No doubt about it, there's no arguments here. But I, trying to be a bit more positive, also want to look to the bright side of things. For me personally, it was getting to over 4,000 subscribers this year. For comparison, when I started this year out, I had a grand total of around 550. Yeah, shit happened. But another thing that this year taught me is that indie games are, in my opinion, more creative, more inspiring, and sometimes even have a greater impact on pop culture than the greater video game market than even AAA titles do. I mean, when was the last time you heard somebody talking about Undertale, Among Us, or Shovel Knight, or any of these other amazing games? Indie games are powerful. By not being constrained by companies that literally decide whether or not you get paid by sticking to an established formula and not taking risks, leads to a more free and interesting gaming experience. I love this quote from the late Satoru Iwata, one of my personal inspirations, saying that, quote, "I sincerely doubt that employees who fear that they may be laid off will be able to develop software titles that could impress people all around the world." I have really delved into the world of indie games this year, from the masterpiece that is Hollow Knight, to the incredible A Hat in Time, to the stylistically unique Hyper Light Drifter, to Owlboy, Among Us, Fall Guys, Celeste, and I even tried Minecraft again. Still not a big fan. And next year, I plan to do the same. I still need to play mainstays like Shovel Knight and Cuphead, Undertale, Pan, and hopefully Silksong, Rivals of Aether, Bug Fables, Binding of Isaac, and so much more. But where am I going with this? Well, I got the opportunity to play a super promising indie game that I want to showcase to you all, and this is honestly a game that I really look out for in the future. I honestly think that this is the next big indie title. You want to see what I'm talking about? Here, take a look. This is Blue Fire, the first game by newcomers Roby Studios, and is a very interesting game about gods, bonds, and fire. Obviously, this game may look a little bit unfamiliar, but that's because it's not even out yet, and the only trailers it has is from Nintendo's Indie World event actually headlining it in the March 17th edition, which, if I were in their shoes, is a huge honor. If you'd like comparisons so you can get a better feel of what type of game this is, think 3D Hollow Knight mixed with Zelda Dungeons, an Ocarina of Time style world with Mario Sunshine style platforming levels, with the difficulty curve of Super Meat Boy and the visual style of Dark Souls mixed with the Wind Waker. If that all makes sense. It's an amalgam that works really well together, carving its own identity into a unique game that definitely deserves more attention, so when it releases not too far from now, coming out Q1 2021, it becomes one of the great indie games like Undertale, Shovel Knight, and Cuphead. So, what did I do? How does it play? What's it about? Those are all the things I'm going to be delving into today when I review? Talk about Blue Fire. Before we start, I want to make this clear right off the bat. I was graciously gifted this game's demo by Roby Studios, but they are not paying me to say anything I'm about to say. Everything that comes out of my mouth is 100% my thoughts, feelings, and experiences. What's crack-a-lacka, Toxiquid? My name is Toxiquid, and in the demo, I got access to two parts of the game, being the Fire Keep and Utha's Temple. Fire Keep is the first area in the game, and you will actually start here when first booting up a save file. Obviously, since they were accessed via a menu, I was a tad weary that it'd be a level-based system, but by talking to the developers directly, I got a confident no, and it can actually be comparable to an Ocarina of Time style map, so in layman's terms, an interlocking set of areas separated by loading zones. And yeah, this was intentional. When talking to the devs, Zelda was a huge inspiration for them. But that wasn't the only one that influenced them. They actually took a Shovel Knight style approach to the development as opposed to the Mighty No. 9 style of things. What am I talking about? What does this mean? Well, I believe that there are 3 styles of indie games: homages, revivals, and the wacky shit. The revivals are games like Yooka-Laylee, Mighty No. 9, and Azure Strikers Gunvolt, with the intent of replicating a singular game or series, not borrowing too many elements from others. The homages are stuff like A Hat in Time, Shovel Knight, and Hollow Knight, where they bring many different aspects of games that worked well and weaves them into their own code. And the wacky shit is just games off doing their own thing, kind of like Untitled Goose Game. I still don't know what the hell that shit is about. Mark Brown from the Game Maker's Toolkit actually has a really good video about how Shovel Knight's game design complements the aesthetics and how it ties together perfectly, so the video for that is in the description if you want to check that out. And Blue Fire really is a homage style game. It borrows ideas from A Hat in Time, Dark Souls, Hollow Knight, as well as Zelda and Mario games. To reaffirm this, here's an actual quote directly from Gabriel Rosa, the game's director, about their style and how they came up with this.
In the last few years, there's been several high-quality 3D platformer games that have had huge success. However, that comeback for the genre has been portraying themes and difficulties that are very similar to what platformers looked like in the early 2000s, which I believe mostly targeted young audiences. In result, most of these games have colorful mascots and cheerful themes. We thought that it would be awesome to have a game that felt like that, but also like it had grown with us over the years and now tackled darker themes and topics. Alongside this 3D platformer comeback, there's also been a resurgence of the Metroidvania 2D genre, which was a lot harder and darker. So it just felt like a great idea to mix both of these things. Concept-wise, I think Blue Fire stands out as probably one of the only dark 3D platformers with a focus on being challenging. In terms of gameplay, based on the feedback that we've had, the controls and movement are what make it feel completely different from other games. There's something about the movement that is very satisfying.
But enough thinking in the hypothetical, now let's talk about the absolutes. I am not going to mince words. This game was fun. It was tight. It was pleasant to play, and I absolutely loved the atmosphere that it portrayed. I was hooked by watching the trailer earlier in the year, but actually playing it is sublime. Obviously, being a platformer, the movement is key in having a fun experience, but the enemy design is also worthy of being talked about. Admittedly, I'm not a fan of a few of these enemies. The little fire leeches and rhino slugs that I could say are the standard grunt enemies are a pain in the ass to kill, but that's probably because I'm bad at combat scenarios. Inversely, bigger enemies or funkier enemies are a joy to fight. Because of your very limited combat options literally being a dash to bring you closer or away from enemies, a horizontal slash, and a vertical slash, it forces you to duck and weave around enemies. In Utha's temple, there are these sentry enemies that honestly are super interesting to fight, especially in big groups, because you have to lock onto them, dodge the sparky boom booms, and then go from there. Oh yeah, I should really talk about the combat and the stages. Sorry, gushing about a new game really makes you lose track of time. For the combat, it's interesting. I can't actually really comment on it, because in my interview with Gabriel Rosa, he said that, hey, the combat system in the demo that you played is completely different than the one in the final game. We drastically simplified a lot of things, and it was just too complicated, so we fixed it. So I really don't know what to say. I can give you a little teaser. For one thing, there's a projectile now. That wasn't a thing before. But other than that, I'm just going to go off with what I actually wrote in the script. But just note now that it's kind of inaccurate, but the basis is there. Alright? Cool. For starters, you only have your dual swords. Yeah, you may be dual wielding, but you ain't doing much else. No projectiles, no combo moves, nada. It's short, simple, and sweet. But what's interesting is that there's 2 types of swipes, being horizontal and vertical, mapped to 2 different buttons. If you play it on the Xbox controller, which I absolutely recommend, The horizontal slash is linked to the X button, and the vertical swipe is mapped to the Y button. It's interesting the effects that both of them have. For instance, the horizontal one is easier to move around with, whereas the vertical one makes you slow down and makes it harder to do so. But on the other hand, the vertical swipe allows you to stay in the air longer, quite literally allowing you to go full Kingdom Hearts on the sentries, whereas the horizontal one does not. There's also a dash akin to a hat in time, but this time around, it's super dependent on how long you press the right trigger. It also makes platforming places super interesting, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. There's also a targeting system akin to Ocarina of Time, and it's super nice. Unlike the Zelda games, you actually don't have to hold down the button to stay locked on, but admittedly it does take a bit to get used to. Lastly, there's a thing called Fire Essence. Want to see what it does? Here, check it out. Yeah, it's a heal. But it's interesting because you don't get a heal in the same way that Dark Souls achieves, but is actually done the same way that an item is gotten. They're interspersed around breakable boxes and from what I can tell do not respawn, so there are a limited amount of fire essences in each area. But honestly, I don't really think that matters that much because when you die, you get all those heals back. So sometimes it is tactically better to just die in some areas and do the thing again instead of dreading doing stuff at low health. Respawning is snappy and I really do like that. It's only a tad slower than respawning in Mario Odyssey, so I think that's really snappy and really rad. Last thing I'd like to praise is the level design. I truly have no words for how lovely it is to see this type of level design again. I have been so depraved of traditional dungeon style exploration and problem solving for so long. I absolutely adored it, even if it was a little bit easy for my taste. But then again, from what I'm told, these areas aren't even a third of the way into the game, so from what I assume, the difficulty will ramp up significantly. It is honestly super refreshing to see this again. I really don't want to spoil more than I already have, but when this game releases in 2021, from what I can tell, it's gonna be a hell of a time. And with all the good shit out of the way, I really do want to touch on some gripes I have with the game. There aren't much, but it's something. First off, volume mixing. I love the more subdued music used in the game, but I will say that the sound effects are loud. When the boss in Uther's temple appeared, it was so loud to the point where I actually had to take off my headphones and I could still hear it. And it couldn't have been on my end because my volume settings in the game were at the lowest setting that wasn't completely muting them. Second, the readability is a tad poor at times, and that really comes down to the coloration and distribution of some platforms. I love the more analogous and monochromatic color schemes used in the dungeons, but I will say that the colors are really muted, and a dash of color would be sincerely appreciated. Lastly, the enemy hitboxes were really wonky for me. I didn't know if I was actually hurting them until I locked on and saw that I did no damage to their health. There are no sound effects, there are no particle effects, there are no effect effects in general, so I don't know if I'm hurting them unless I physically see that bar go down. Also, checkpoints are really few and far between, so slogging back is a tad cumbersome after you die. I did talk to the developers about this, and they're considering putting in more checkpoints, but only time will tell to see if actually that comes to be. And that was Blue Fire. I am super excited about this game, and there's so much more in this demo that I haven't even shown in the videos. New characters, the plot, mechanics, emotes, bosses, the fact that the protagonist is one of the dopest looking main characters that I've seen in a long time, the void, spirits, and so much more. And if you want to see more, check out the trailers for the game, share them around, publicity is good for them. I want this game to do astronomically well. And when it releases on PC, Nintendo Switch, Xbox, and PS4 in 2021, I really hope that you get it. And since you watched to the end, I actually have something special that I want to announce. By joining the Roby Studios' Discord server, which is linked in the description of this video, you can potentially download and play the demo for yourself, so you can actually make your own judgment call if you're still a little bit iffy on it. Don't worry, it's free. For me, it absolutely hooked me in, and I really hope that it can hook you in the same way it did for me as well. Thank you so much for watching, thank you for an amazing 2020, and keep on crack-a-lackin'.